Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today's plan was to get off the ship and do what generations of sun-seeking tourists have done before me. Visit Mykonos, a tiny jewel box of an island here in the Aegean, located about halfway between Athens and the Turkish coast. My plan was to soak up the sun. I came prepared with sunscreen and a hat, but the weather decided that wasn't enough protection. It rained during about half of my visit. That water dampened my enthusiasm for hauling out my not waterproof camera, but not for that visit. The island is famous for its laid-back atmosphere, the beaches, and the windmills shown here. There's more, however, so let's take a look. Today on The Armchair Traveler. My name is Judy, and I love travel, history, and finding out what makes people tick. If you're enjoying my content, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Your help means more people will see my content. If you want more information, I have a WordPress blog, a page on Facebook, and a Twitter handle. The addresses are here or in the information block at the bottom of the screen. Thank you and enjoy your visit. Mykonos is a tiny island, a mere 33 square miles, and so small it barely registers on this map. It's made up mostly of granite. The island has had numerous owners, starting with the original inhabitants, a people called the Carians, who came from Caria, a region in what is now present-day Turkey. Homer mentioned them, and they even got a nod in the Old Testament. They were real people. Perhaps some of them fled here after the fall of Troy. We don't know much else about them except that they were excellent soldiers and were known as mercenaries. Their time ended here in the 11th century BCE. They were followed by waves of successors, including the Ionians, the Romans, the Byzantines, the Venetians, and finally in the 16th century the Ottomans. Eventually the Greek Revolution deposed the Ottomans and Mykonos gained its independence. The island is mostly granite, quite rocky, and reaches its highest elevation of more than 1,100 feet. When you stand on some of the beaches, if you want to look at the top of the mountains, you'll give yourself a crick in the neck. There are some small farms on the island, and mining used to play a role, but neither of these is very important today. In the 20th century, tourism became the name of the game. The island has an international airport, but the more interesting way to arrive is either by ferry or on a cruise ship. Once upon a time, smaller cruise ships could tie up at the old port right here in the center of town, but those days are long over. Mykonos' new port is in Turlos, not so far from Mykonos town, but far enough that all of the passengers are generally herded onto buses for the ride into the city. If you wanted to see the town on your own, I think you could walk, but I was on a tour with a cruise ship company whose biggest selling point was, in my opinion, that if we were late getting back, the boat would have to wait for us. Our tour began with a side trip to a town called Armchair, which sits almost in the center of the island. The major thing to see here is a monastery, and it is quite a sight. This monastery dates from 1542, although it was significantly rebuilt and remodeled in the 1760s, as you can see from the carving on the lintel above this door. It features a blend of local architecture with some Byzantine elements, including a large dome. The front facade and the bell tower appear to be marble or perhaps highly polished limestone, but most of the exterior is whitewashed stucco. There's a marble fountain in the monastery's front yard. The whitewashed stucco deserves a bit of explanation since we're going to see quite a bit of it. Although Mykonos was overcast and actually rained during my visit, most of the time it's sunny and quite hot. The whitewash is quite practical and not just artistic. It reflects the sunlight and helps keep the interiors cool. It also minimizes how much heat is actually absorbed into the building material. The white and blue buildings are synonymous with the Greek islands, but there's also a practical medical reason why painting your home white was once upon a time required. In 1938, there was a cholera outbreak. The whitewash contained limestone, which was a disinfectant. The exterior is certainly eye-catching, but the interior is even more so once your eyes adjust to the gloom. The room is dominated by an impressive wooden iconostasis, or altar screen, dating from 1775, and featuring images of apostles, saints, and scenes from the New Testament. An iconostasis is an important feature in Eastern Orthodox churches and can be found in Greek Orthodox, Russian, and Ukrainian Orthodox churches. Its purpose is to symbolize a kind of barrier between the heavenly realm, behind the screen, and the earthly realm in front, where people like us would gather. One feature of the iconostasis that continues to elude me is the rather warlike person shown in it, complete with a red cloak, Roman imperial-looking clothing, wings, and a sword. I tried to figure it out and believe he must represent Saint Demetrius, who is often depicted wearing the armor of a Roman soldier. This was one of those days when I really wish I had taken a class in comparative religion. The old port of the island sits on a small harbor quite close to those famous windmills and is called Little Venice. Its history dates back to perhaps the 14th century, although a fine sheltered harbor like this one would have been known to mariners much earlier than that. In the 18th century, wealthy merchants built their homes here, overlooking the sea. Most of those buildings are now hotels, bars, and restaurants, but one is a museum. The main square here in town is named for Manto Mavrogenis. There's a somewhat larger than life-size bust of her, which doesn't do her any favors, at least not in my opinion. She was a Greek patriot, a heroine, and also extremely pretty. Her legacy, however, went far beyond mere beauty. Manto exemplified courage, patriotism, and sacrifice during the Greek War of Independence against the Turks. She was a Greek princess, interested in Greek affairs, although she'd been born in Trieste, and a heroine of the Wars of Independence. Her father was a merchant and member of a secret society which played a role in planning the Greek Revolution. She used her family money to buy, equip, and man 2 ships that she used to pursue pirates attacking the island. Later on, under her leadership, the Myconians managed to repulse some Ottoman Turks who had landed on the island in 1822. She continued working on these projects and spent a considerable amount of time in Europe fundraising. When the war finally ended, she was awarded the rank of lieutenant general. I showed you a photograph from the beach, giving you an idea of just how fast the hills rise up from the sea. The same is true here in the city. Since no one in our group spoke any Greek, we all played follow the leader with our guide. Climb a few steps, and you come to an entire new level of the city, complete with its own sidewalk, and then you would be confronted with still more steps. In the 18th and 19th centuries, rich people came to Mykonos and set out vacation or family homes. I think it was much the same as the way rich people now set up homes along the Italian lakes. This is Lena's Folklore Museum. It's a 19th century Myconian townhouse that was part of a larger building that once belonged to a genuine war hero, a man named Nicholas Surmilis. He was a captain and was born in Trieste, like Manto, but lived here in Mykonos and is a hero of the Cretan struggle for independence from the Ottoman Empire. The museum is actually quite small and includes a few ship models, some maps, and some antiques. The name Lena's house refers to its last inhabitant, Lena Scrivanu. The proprietors of the museums had installed an air conditioner, but I don't recall it actually working. I did, however, enjoy the view of the flowers in the garden. I think almost everyone thinks of Mykonos with whitewashed homes and blue trim, but other colors are permissible. The color code requires doors and windows to be painted blue, red, or green. This dates back to a tradition in which sailors used to paint their doors blue, farmers painted them green, and everybody else used red. This is probably the most famous site on the island, and one that has graced thousands of travel posters ever since before I was born. The location of these windmills, set on a hill above the harbor, was to maximize the chances of catching the wind. It's a substantial climb uphill to the base of those windmills from the harbor, which look far more romantic in the distance than up close. Even so, they are probably Mykonos's most recognized and photographed landmarks. The buildings actually date back to the 1400s and were originally built by the Venetians, who once controlled the island. They weren't decorative. They were working. They overlook the sea and can be seen from every point in town, which makes them a handy landmark. They don't look like the iron and steel American windmills I was familiar with, but I learned that the design is quite traditional. A round house, whitewashed exterior, and pointed roofs. They were used to mill wheat and kept in use until the middle of the 20th century. There are quite a few more here on the island, but these 7 are a real landmark. One of them is even a museum. Thank you for joining me for this brief visit to Mykonos, the island of the wind. Come back next time for another adventure with me here on The Armchair Traveler.